When single mother Rebecca Martinez bought the foreclosed farmhouse in rural Montana with her final $15,000, neighbors thought she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. But what she discovered behind a crumbling wall in the cellar would bring FBI agents to her doorstep and uncover a 75-year-old secret that would change everything she thought she knew about her new home and America's history. Before we dive into this incredible journey, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from around the world. And if this story captures your attention, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're sharing exclusive footage of what the agents found that has never been shown publicly. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The spring morning in 2019, when Rebecca Martinez first drove down the gravel path to what would become her new home, she couldn't have imagined the extraordinary events that would unfold in the months ahead. The farmhouse, abandoned for nearly a decade, sat like a weathered sentinel against the backdrop of the Glacier National Park mountains, its white paint peeling and windows boarded shut. At 34, Rebecca had reached what felt like rock bottom. 6 months earlier, her husband of 10 years had left without warning, taking their joint savings and leaving her with their 8-year-old daughter Emma and a mountain of debt. Her job as a medical technician in Great Falls barely covered their apartment rent, let alone the legal fees from the divorce proceedings. When the bank foreclosed on houses throughout Montana during the economic downturn, Rebecca saw an opportunity that others saw as pure desperation. "Mom, are we really going to live here?" Emma asked, her voice small as she pressed her face against the passenger window of their aging Honda Civic. The farmhouse looked even more daunting up close, with sagging gutters and a front porch that listed to one side like a ship taking on water. Evie had claimed most of the exterior walls, and what had once been a flower garden was now a jungle of weeds and volunteer saplings. Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "It's going to be an adventure. Sweetheart, sometimes the best treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places." She'd been repeating variations of this sentiment to herself for weeks, ever since she'd won the auction with her bid of exactly $15,000, every penny she had left in the world after the divorce settlement. The interior of the house told the story of decades of neglect punctuated by failed attempts at renovation. The previous owners, the Hoffman family, had apparently started multiple projects over the years before abandoning them half-finished. Wallpaper curled away from walls in long strips, floors creaked ominously under their feet, and several windows had cracked panes that let in not just light, but also Montana's unpredictable weather. Yet beneath the decay, Rebecca's trained eye began to notice details that gave her hope. The bone structure of the house was solid, thick wooden beams, real hardwood floors beneath the damaged linoleum, and craftsman-era built-ins that had survived everything time could throw at them. The kitchen, though hopelessly outdated, had good natural light and enough space for Emma to do homework while Rebecca cooked. "The bedrooms are upstairs," Rebecca explained, as they climbed the narrow staircase, testing each step carefully. "You can pick whichever one you want." Emma raced ahead, her sneakers echoing on the hardwood, and Rebecca heard her delighted squeal from the front bedroom. "This one has a window seat, Mom, and I can see the mountains." Rebecca joined her daughter at the window and had to admit, the view was spectacular. The previous owners had chosen this spot well. Rolling fields stretched toward the foothills, and on a clear day like today, the snow-capped peaks of Glacier National Park dominated the horizon. For the first time since making the purchase, Rebecca felt something other than panic about their future. That first night, as they camped out in sleeping bags in the living room with takeout from the only restaurant in the nearby town of Cedar Ridge, Emma proved to be more adaptable than Rebecca had dared hope. "It's like we're explorers," she announced, "building a fort out of moving boxes. And this is our base camp before we discover all the house's secrets." The comment proved more prophetic than either of them could have imagined. The early days at the farmhouse were a blur of urgent repairs and gradual exploration. Rebecca had taken a second job at a medical clinic in Kalispell, 40 minutes away, which meant leaving before dawn and returning after dark most days. Emma, resilient as only children can be, threw herself into documenting every corner of their new home, creating detailed maps and writing stories about the house's previous inhabitants. Rebecca's first priority was making the house habitable for winter, which meant addressing the heating system, insulation, and the roof leak in the kitchen that had created an interesting pattern of water stains on the ceiling. She'd grown up, helping her father with construction projects in Texas, and while she was no expert, she could handle basic repairs and wasn't afraid of hard work. It was during one of these repair projects that Rebecca first noticed something odd about the basement. The house had been built in the 1940s, and like many farmhouses of that era, it had a partial cellar used primarily for storage. Most of the basement was exactly what you'd expect: stone walls, exposed wooden beams, and the musty smell of decades of stored farm equipment and canned goods forgotten by long-ago residents. But there was something unusual about the far wall. While the other three walls were clearly part of the original construction, made from local fieldstone, this wall looked different. The stones were more uniform, and the mortar between them appeared newer, though still decades old. More intriguingly, the wall seemed to extend further than necessary, creating an oddly shaped space that didn't align with the house's floor plan above. Rebecca mentioned this to Harold Cranston, the elderly man who delivered propane and had lived in Cedar Ridge his entire life. Harold had known the Hoffman family and was a walking encyclopedia of local history. The Hoffmans were always secretive. "Folks," he mused, scratching his grey beard, "old Ernst Hoffman, he came here right after the war, World War II, that is. Kept to himself mostly, rarely came to town except for supplies. Folks always wondered what exactly happened to the family. One day they were there, next day the house was empty. Must have been late 70s or early 80s. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This conversation planted a seed of curiosity that grew stronger every time Rebecca went to the basement for laundry or storage. During a particularly sleepless night in late September, she found herself standing in front of the mysterious wall with a flashlight, running her hands along the mortar seams. Up close, she could see subtle differences in the pattern, sections where the mortar had been removed and replaced, as if someone had once opened a passage and then sealed it up again. Emma noticed her mother's preoccupation and, with the natural curiosity of an 8-year-old, began her own investigation. She was smaller and more agile than Rebecca, and one afternoon while her mother was at work, she discovered something that had escaped Rebecca's notice. Behind an old wooden crate at the base of the wall was a section where the mortar had crumbled away, leaving a gap just large enough for a child's hand. "Mom, I found something," Emma announced excitedly when Rebecca returned from her evening shift. She led her mother to the basement and showed her the gap. When Rebecca shone her flashlight through the opening, instead of solid stone, she saw darkness, empty space beyond the wall. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Rebecca returned to the basement with a hammer and chisel. The mortar was old and easier to remove than she'd expected. Within an hour, she had enlarged the hole enough to shine her flashlight through and see what lay beyond. What she discovered made her heart race. The wall concealed a small room, perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, with a concrete floor and walls, lined with what appeared to be military surplus shelving, but it wasn't empty. Even in the limited beam of her flashlight, she could make out boxes, file cabinets, and other objects carefully arranged throughout the space. Rebecca spent the rest of the night carefully removing stones to create an opening large enough to crawl through. By dawn, exhausted but driven by curiosity, she had created a passage into the hidden room. The space beyond was dry and remarkably well preserved. The air smelled of dust and old paper, but there was no moisture damage or signs of decay. The room had clearly been deliberately constructed and carefully maintained for decades before being sealed up. Along one wall stood 3 military-style filing cabinets, their olive-green paint still intact. Opposite them were shelves lined with boxes of various sizes, each labeled with code numbers and dates ranging from 1944 to 1978. In the center of the room sat a small desk with a shortwave radio, its dials and meters suggesting it was a high-end model from the 1950s. But what immediately caught Rebecca's attention was the safe. It wasn't hidden or concealed. It sat prominently in the corner, a heavy black case that looked like something from a bank vault. Unlike everything else in the room, it showed signs of regular use. The area around it was free of dust, and there were fresh-looking scratches around the combination dial. Rebecca's hands trembled as she approached the safe. Whatever was inside had been important enough for someone to build an entire secret room around it, important enough to hide it behind a false wall for decades. The combination lock was a classic model, with 3 rotating dials that would require the correct sequence. To open, on impulse, she tried the most obvious combinations: 1945, 1776, 000. Nothing. Then she noticed something carved into the metal near the bottom of the safe. E.H., 1947-1978. Ernst Hoffmann, she realized. The years might represent when he'd acquired the safe and when he'd last accessed it. She tried 1947. The first dial clicked into place. She tried 1978. The second dial followed. For the third number, she thought about what Harold had told her. About Ernst Hoffmann. He'd come to Montana right after World War II. She tried 1945, the year the war ended. The third dial clicked, and she heard the mechanical sound of tumblers falling into place. The safe door opened with a deep, satisfying click. Inside, Rebecca found documents that would change not just her life, but potentially rewrite a chapter of World War II history. The safe contained 3 sections: a top shelf with loose papers and photographs, a middle section with bound ledgers and maps, and a bottom compartment that held something that made Rebecca's blood run cold. The photographs on the top shelf showed groups of men in military uniforms, but not American uniforms. These were clearly German, with dated stamps and German text on the back. Mixed with these were photographs of the farmhouse itself, but from decades earlier, showing modifications that no longer existed, additional buildings, what appeared to be communication equipment, and people who were definitely not the typical Montana farmers you'd expect to see. The documents were even more shocking. Typed. Reports in both German and English, with official-looking letterheads and stamps, lists of names, coordinates, and what appeared to be coded messages. Financial records showing large sums of money moving through Swiss bank accounts. And most disturbing of all, detailed maps of American military installations, power plants, and government buildings, annotated in German with dates from the 1940s and 1950s. But it was the bottom compartment that made Rebecca realize she was holding something far beyond her ability to handle alone. Inside was a leather portfolio containing what appeared to be original Nazi documents, orders, identification papers, and photographs that seemed to suggest Ernst Hoffmann hadn't just been a German immigrant fleeing post-war Europe, but potentially something much more dangerous, One document in particular caught her attention, a letter dated 1952, written in English but with German signatures discussing Operation Berghaus and referencing assets in place throughout the American Western territories. The letter mentioned specific dates for activation and contained coordinates that, when Rebecca checked against modern maps, corresponded to locations near major American military installations. Rebecca spent the next 3 hours going through document after document, her shock growing with each revelation. Phone numbers for contacts in Washington, D.C., detailed information about atomic research facilities, financial records showing the purchase of property throughout Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado under various aliases. What she was looking at appeared to be evidence of a Nazi network that had operated in the American West for decades after the war ended. By the time the sun rose, Rebecca had documented everything with her phone camera, but she knew she was in over her head. This wasn't local history or family secrets. This was potentially information that national security agencies would need to see. She carefully closed the safe, replaced the stones to conceal the entrance to the hidden room, and tried to process what she'd discovered. In the space of a single night, her quiet new life in rural Montana had become something she never could have imagined. As Emma got ready for school the next morning, chattering about her plans to build a treehouse in the big oak behind the house, Rebecca looked at her daughter and realized their lives were about to change in ways she couldn't predict. The mystery of the farmhouse had become something much larger, something that connected their small piece of Montana to events that had shaped the world decades before either of them was born. Standing in her kitchen, coffee cup trembling in her hands, Rebecca Martinez faced a decision that would determine not just their future, but potentially uncover secrets that had been hidden in plain sight for over 70 years. The question wasn't just who Ernst Hoffmann really was, but who else might have known about his secret, and whether that network had truly ended when he disappeared in the late 1970s, or if it was still active, waiting in the shadows of America's heartland. Rebecca stared at her phone screen, the photos she'd taken of the Nazi documents glowing in the pre-dawn darkness of her kitchen. Each image seemed more surreal than the last. Official stamps, German military insignia, and coordinates that pointed to American military installations. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them, the weight of what she'd discovered pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to call the FBI immediately. But Rebecca Martinez had never been one to act impulsively, especially when it came to protecting Emma. What if the authorities didn't believe her? What if they thought she was fabricating evidence? Worse yet, what if there were still people out there who knew about Ernst Hoffmann's secret, people who might see her as a threat? She made coffee with trembling hands and sat at her small kitchen table, trying to think logically. Rebecca had always been methodical. It's what made her good at her medical technician job, this ability to look at symptoms and piece together a diagnosis. Now she needed to treat this situation the same way. First, she needed to understand what she'd found. Second, she needed to figure out who to trust. And third, she needed to make sure Emma remained safe throughout whatever was about to happen. Over the next week, Rebecca threw herself into research with an intensity that surprised even her. After putting Emma to bed each night, she would spread Ernst Hoffmann's documents across the kitchen table, cross-referencing names and dates with historical records she found online. What she discovered made the documents even more credible and more terrifying. Operation Berghaus, mentioned in several letters, was a name that appeared in declassified CIA documents from the 1950s. The operation had been a covert effort to track down Nazi war criminals and assets in the United States. But according to these records, it had been largely unsuccessful. The documents in her basement suggested why. The very people they were hunting had been operating right under their noses, using American identities and integrating into American communities. Ernst Hoffmann wasn't his real name. According to a personal letter hidden in one of the ledgers, he was actually Oberst Heinrich Müller, a former SS officer who had overseen communications intelligence for the Nazi war effort. After the fall of Berlin, he'd been smuggled to Argentina along with thousands of other Nazi officials. But unlike most who stayed in South America, Müller had been brought to the United States as part of a larger network. The financial records were equally revealing. Money had flowed through the Montana farmhouse operation for decades, funding the purchase of properties near strategic American locations. Names in the documents corresponded to businesses in Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado that still existed. Today, ranches, mining operations, and small towns that had been quietly infiltrated and used as bases for intelligence gathering. Most chilling were the detailed surveillance reports on American nuclear facilities, military bases, and government research centers. These weren't casual observations. They were professional intelligence assessments of vulnerabilities, security, protocols, and personnel. The reports continued well into the 1970s, suggesting the network had remained active for 30 years after the war ended. Rebecca realized she was looking at evidence of one of the longest-running espionage operations in American history, hidden in plain sight in the American heartland. And now she was the only person who knew about it. The stress of keeping such an enormous secret while maintaining normal life proved nearly impossible. Rebecca found herself jumping at unexpected sounds, checking and rechecking the locks on the farmhouse doors and watching every car that drove down their rural road with suspicion. Emma noticed her mother's tension and began asking questions Rebecca couldn't answer. "Mum, are you okay? You seem really worried about something," Emma said one evening as they ate dinner. Her 8-year-old eyes held a wisdom that sometimes caught Rebecca off guard. "I'm just adjusting to our new life here, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out," Rebecca replied, hating herself for the half-truth, but knowing she couldn't burden Emma with the reality of what she'd found. Emma wasn't convinced. "Is it about the basement? You've been spending a lot of time down there lately." Rebecca's heart skipped. She'd been so careful to seal up the hidden room after each visit, but children noticed everything. "I've just been organizing storage, Em. Nothing exciting." That weekend, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't carry this burden alone anymore, and Emma deserved to feel safe in their home. She needed to talk to someone she could trust, someone with the knowledge and connections to help her navigate this situation. She thought of Dr. James Patterson, her supervising physician at the Kalispell Medical Center. Dr. Patterson was not only respected in his field, but was also a veteran who served in military intelligence during the Gulf War. More importantly, he was someone Rebecca had come to trust during her months working at the clinic. On Monday morning, Rebecca asked Dr. Patterson if she could speak with him privately. They met in his office after the clinic closed, the parking lot empty except for their cars. Rebecca had rehearsed what she would say, but when the moment came, the words tumbled out in a rush. "Dr. Patterson, I need to tell you something that's going to sound completely insane, but I need someone I trust to help me figure out what to do," she began. She showed him the photographs on her phone, watching his expression change from polite interest to serious concern to complete shock. Dr. Patterson had seen enough classified documents during his military service to recognize authenticity when he saw it. "Rebecca," he said slowly, "where exactly did you find these?" She told him everything: the hidden room, the safe, the documents spanning decades of surveillance and espionage. Dr. Patterson listened without interruption, occasionally asking her to zoom in on particular photographs or scroll back to previous images. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. This is This is bigger than anything local law enforcement can handle. These documents, if they're authentic, and they appear to be, represent a threat to national security that goes back decades. So what do I do? Who do I call? I'm a medical technician from Texas who bought a farmhouse. I don't know how to handle something like this. Dr. Patterson leaned back in his chair, thinking. I have a contact at the FBI field office in Helena, Agent Sarah Chen. I served with her brother in the Army. She specializes in counterintelligence and has the security clearance to handle something like this properly. But what if word gets out? What if there are still people connected to this network? Emma and I could be in danger. That's exactly why you need federal protection, Dr. Patterson said. Rebecca, what you've found could rewrite the history of post-war intelligence operations, but more importantly, some of those coordinates and surveillance reports are recent enough that this network might still be active. The idea that Nazi operatives might still be functioning in modern America seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Patterson helped Rebecca create encrypted copies of all the documents and promised to contact Agent Chen immediately. In the meantime, he said, I want you to be extremely careful. Don't discuss this with anyone else, don't go back to that room alone, and if anything seems unusual at your house, call me immediately. Rebecca returned home that evening, feeling both relieved and terrified. She'd taken the first step toward getting help, but she'd also set in motion events she couldn't control. As she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter looked up at her with those wise 8-year-old eyes again. Mom, that doctor you talked to today, Dr. Patterson, he's going to help us, isn't he? Rebecca was startled. How did you know I talked to Dr. Patterson about anything important? Emma shrugged. You had your worried face on when you came home, but it was a different worried face. Like when you're worried, but you think things might get better. Sometimes Rebecca wondered if her daughter had inherited some kind of intuitive gift. Yes, sweetheart, Dr. Patterson is going to help us with something important. Is it about the secret room? Rebecca's blood ran cold. What secret room? The one in the basement. I know you found one, Mom. I can hear you moving around down there at night, and yesterday I saw you putting stones back in the wall. Plus, you've been learning German. Learning German? Emma giggled. I saw the German pronunciation website on your computer. You've been trying to read something in German, haven't you? Rebecca realized her 8-year-old was far more observant than she'd given her credit for. Emma had figured out most of the truth on her own. That night, after Emma was asleep, Rebecca made another decision. She needed to go back to the hidden room one more time before the authorities arrived. There might be something she'd missed, some detail that would help Agent Chen understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. She descended into the basement with her flashlight and carefully removed the stones she'd replaced. The hidden room looked exactly as she'd left it, but this time she searched more systematically. In the back corner, behind one of the filing cabinets, she found something she'd overlooked before. A small metal box containing what appeared to be keys. The keys were old but well maintained, each tagged with a number corresponding to entries in one of the ledgers. As Rebecca cross-referenced the keys with the ledger entries, she realized they opened safety deposit boxes and storage units throughout the region. The network wasn't just operating from this farmhouse. It had assets scattered across 3 states. More disturbing still, some of the entries were dated within the last 5 years. Someone had been maintaining this network, accessing these resources long after Ernst Hoffmann, Heinrich Müller had disappeared. Rebecca photographed the keys and the corresponding ledger entries, then carefully returned everything to its original position. As she replaced the stones once more, she had the unsettling feeling that she was being watched. She climbed the basement stairs more quickly than usual and locked the door behind her. The farmhouse felt different now, as if every shadow might hide someone who knew what she'd discovered. She checked all the windows and doors twice before going to bed. The next morning brought a development that changed everything. Dr. Patterson called just as Rebecca was getting Emma ready for school. "Rebecca, Agent Chen wants to meet with you today, but there's something you need to know first. When she ran the names from your documents through federal databases, she got hits. Some of the people mentioned in those papers are still alive." Rebecca felt the room spin slightly. Still alive? But those documents are from the 1940s and 50s. The children and grandchildren, Rebecca. And some of them are in positions of significant influence. This isn't just historical espionage. This is an active investigation now. Agent Chen arrived at the farmhouse that afternoon in an unmarked sedan, accompanied by 2 other agents and a technical specialist. Sarah Chen was a small woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the farmhouse as she approached. "Ms. Martinez," she said, extending her hand, "Dr. Patterson has briefed me on what you've found. I need to see everything." Rebecca led them to the basement and showed them how to access the hidden room. Agent Chen's reaction upon seeing the documents and equipment was immediate and professional. "We're going to need to treat this entire property as a crime scene," she announced. "Ms. Martinez, you and your daughter will need to be relocated temporarily while we process everything." "Relocated?" Rebecca's heart pounded. "For how long?" "That depends on what we find. But based on what Dr. Patterson showed me, this investigation could take months, and there are security considerations. If this network is still active, you could be in danger." As federal agents swarmed over her farmhouse, photographing and cataloging everything, Rebecca realized her quiet new life in Montana was over. But in its place was something she'd never expected: the opportunity to help uncover one of the longest-running espionage operations in American history. Emma, to her credit, handled the sudden appearance of FBI agents with remarkable composure. "Are you the good guys?" she asked Agent Chen directly. "Yes, we are, and your mom is helping us catch some bad guys who have been hiding for a long time." "Like in the movies?" "Sort of like in the movies," Agent Chen smiled. "But more important than any movie." As they packed their essential belongings that evening, preparing to move to a safe house until the investigation was complete, Rebecca looked around the farmhouse that had changed their lives in ways she never could have imagined. What had started as a desperate attempt to provide a home for her and Emma had become something far greater, a chance to close a chapter of American history that had remained open for 70 years. The single mother who had bought a farmhouse with her last $15,000 was about to help the FBI uncover a Nazi network that had operated in American territory for decades. Agent Chen approached Rebecca as she finished packing Emma's school supplies. "Miss Martinez, I want you to know that what you've done here, what you've discovered and how you've handled it, this is going to make a difference. Real people are going to be safer because of your courage." Rebecca looked around the kitchen where she'd first examined those shocking documents, then up the stairs where Emma had chosen her bedroom with the mountain view. This farmhouse had given them so much more than shelter. It had revealed a truth that needed to be told, no matter how dangerous or complicated. "Agent Chen," Rebecca said, "I'm ready to tell you everything. But I want you to promise me something. When this is over, when you've caught whoever is still out there, I want us to be able to come home. This house has secrets, but it's still our home." Agent Chen nodded. "We'll make sure of it. And Ms. Martinez, your daughter is lucky to have someone as brave as you for a mother." As their car pulled away from the farmhouse, Emma pressed her face to the rear window, watching their home disappear behind the hills. "Mom, when we come back, will the house still have its secrets?" Rebecca put her arm around her daughter and thought about the question. The hidden room would be empty now, its contents in federal custody. The mystery of Ernst Hoffmann would be solved. But the farmhouse would always be the place where a single mother and her daughter had stumbled upon history itself. The house will have new stories to tell, Em. Different secrets, but better ones. Stories about how sometimes ordinary people find extraordinary things and how courage can change the world. Outside the car window, the Montana landscape rolled. Past, the same mountains and fields that had hidden a Nazi network for decades. But now those secrets were coming into the light, thanks to a medical technician from Texas who had risked everything to buy a farmhouse and ended up uncovering one of America's most closely guarded mysteries. The FBI safe house was a modest two-bedroom apartment in Billings, 90 minutes from the farmhouse, but a world away from the life Rebecca and Emma had been building. For the first week, they lived in a strange limbo, unable to return home, unable to discuss what they'd discovered, and unable to predict when their lives might return to normal. Emma adapted with the resilience of childhood, turning their temporary exile into an adventure. She created elaborate drawings of secret agent headquarters and wrote stories about her mother discovering enemy spy bases. Rebecca marveled at her daughter's ability to find excitement in upheaval, wishing she could view their situation with the same optimism. Agent Chen visited daily, updating Rebecca on the investigation's progress and asking detailed questions about every aspect of her discovery. The FBI team had found significantly more in the hidden room than Rebecca's initial exploration had revealed. Behind false panels in the filing cabinets, they'd discovered microfilm containing thousands of photographs of classified American documents, detailed personnel files on American military officers dating back to the 1940s, and communication protocols for international contacts. The scope of this network is beyond anything we initially imagined, Agent Chen explained during one of their sessions. We've identified at least 15 properties across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado that were purchased using funds traced to this operation. Each location appears to have served a specific purpose: communication relays, document storage, safe houses for assets. Assets? Rebecca asked. People. Nazi war criminals who were given new identities and integrated into American communities. We're talking about dozens of individuals who lived normal lives as farmers, businessmen, even local government officials, while gathering intelligence and maintaining contact with handlers overseas. The revelation that Nazi operatives had lived as ordinary Americans for decades sent chills down Rebecca's spine. How many communities had unknowingly harbored war criminals? How many American secrets had been compromised? But the most shocking development came 2 weeks into the investigation. Agent Chen arrived at the safe house with news that would change everything they thought they knew about the case. Rebecca, we've been monitoring communications across all the properties connected to this network. Yesterday, someone accessed a storage unit in Missoula, one of the locations listed in Ernst Hoffmann's ledgers. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. Someone still active. Not just active. They knew we were investigating. The storage unit had been cleaned out hours before our team arrived. But here's what's interesting. Our surveillance cameras caught the person responsible. Agent Chen showed Rebecca a series of photographs from the storage facility's security system. The images showed a man in his 50s, unremarkable in appearance, methodically removing boxes from Unit 247. What made Rebecca gasp was the final photograph, the man looking directly at the camera as if he knew he was being watched. We ran his face through our databases. His name is Thomas Hoffmann. He's Ernst Hoffmann's grandson. The implications hit Rebecca like a physical blow. His grandson? But that means the network never ended, Agent Chen confirmed. It passed, from generation to generation. Ernst Hoffmann, or Heinrich Müller, trained his son who trained his son. We're dealing with a multi-generational espionage cell that's been operating continuously since 1947. Rebecca thought about all the times she'd felt watched in the farmhouse, all the moments when something had seemed not quite right in their rural neighborhood. Do you think he knows about me? About what I found? We have to assume he does, which is why we're expanding our investigation and increasing your protection detail. The next phase of the investigation would require Rebecca to do something that terrified her more than anything she'd faced so far. The FBI needed her to return to the farmhouse, not to live there, but to help them set up a surveillance operation that might finally bring Thomas Hoffman and his network into the open. You're the only person who understands the layout of that hidden room, who knows exactly how everything was positioned, Agent Chen explained. We need to restore it to exactly how you found it. Make it appear that nothing has been discovered. If Thomas comes looking for something his grandfather left behind, we'll be ready. Rebecca's hands shook as she considered the request. You want to use me as bait. Not bait exactly. You'll be under constant protection, and you won't be there when he arrives. But we need someone who can help us make everything look undisturbed. Emma, who had been quietly coloring at the kitchen table, looked up. Will we get to go home after you catch the bad guys, Mom? Agent Chen knelt down to Emma's level. That's exactly what we're hoping, sweetheart. Your mom found something very important, and now she can help us finish the job. Rebecca made the decision that would define the next chapter of their lives. Okay, I'll do it, but I want Emma somewhere safe, far from here, until this is over. The FBI arranged for Emma to stay with Rebecca's sister Maria in Phoenix, telling their school and friends that they were visiting family. Emma handled the separation with typical grace, but Rebecca could see the worry in her daughter's eyes as they said goodbye at the airport. You promise you'll come get me when it's safe? Emma asked, hugging her mother tightly. I promise, sweetheart. And when this is all over, we'll have the most incredible story to tell. Returning to the farmhouse after 3 weeks away felt surreal. The building looked exactly as they'd left it, but Rebecca now knew that federal agents had been through every inch of it, photographing evidence, mapping the hidden room, and installing sophisticated surveillance equipment. Agent Chen led Rebecca through the basement, showing her how they'd rebuilt the false wall to look exactly as she'd originally found it. Every stone had been photographed and replaced in its exact position. The hidden room beyond had been meticulously restored, with each document, piece of equipment, and furniture item returned to its original location. We've installed micro cameras throughout the room and the basement, Agent Chen explained. Temperature and motion sensors that will alert us the moment anyone enters the house. Rebecca, if Thomas Hoffman comes here, we'll know about it before he even reaches the front door. The surveillance operation began immediately. Rebecca stayed in a hotel 20 minutes away, but each day she would drive past the farmhouse, with Agent Chen monitoring the situation and looking for any signs of unusual activity. The waiting was excruciating. Every day that passed without contact made Rebecca wonder if Thomas Hoffman knew more than they'd anticipated. The break came on a Tuesday evening in October, exactly 1 month after the investigation had begun. Agent Chen's phone buzzed with an urgent alert as they were reviewing the day's surveillance footage in their makeshift command center. He's here, she announced, her voice tight with excitement and concern. Thomas Hoffman just entered the property. The surveillance footage showed a man matching their photographs, walking confidently through the farmhouse's front door. He moved with familiarity, clearly knowing the layout of the building. Most importantly, he was heading directly for the basement. Rebecca watched the screens with fascination and terror as Thomas descended the basement stairs, flashlight in hand. He moved immediately to the false wall, but instead of looking for the small opening Rebecca had discovered, he went to a different section entirely. "He knows something we don't," Agent Chen muttered, speaking into her radio to coordinate with the tactical teams positioned around the property. On screen, Thomas pressed against a stone near the ceiling of the false wall. To everyone's amazement, a completely different section of the wall swung inward, a hidden entrance they had never discovered. "There's another room," Rebecca breathed, "a second hidden room." The surveillance cameras automatically adjusted to night vision as Thomas disappeared into this new space. For several minutes, they could only hear sounds: boxes being moved, papers rustling, and what sounded like equipment being activated. When Thomas finally emerged, he was carrying a briefcase that hadn't been there when he entered. More concerning, he also carried what appeared to be communication equipment, a device that definitely wasn't from the 1940s, but looked distinctly modern. Agent Chen made the decision to move in. "All teams go, take him now." Rebecca watched through the surveillance feeds as FBI agents surrounded the farmhouse. Thomas Hoffman didn't run. Instead, he calmly set down the briefcase and raised his hands, as if he'd been expecting this moment for years. The arrest was anticlimactic in its efficiency. Thomas Hoffman, the grandson of a Nazi war criminal who had spent his entire life continuing his grandfather's work, was taken into custody without resistance. But the contents of that briefcase would prove to be more explosive than anyone had anticipated. Inside were documents that revealed the true scope of the network's modern operations. Thomas Hoffman hadn't just been maintaining his grandfather's legacy, he'd been actively expanding it. The network now included contacts in technology companies, defense contractors, and even government agencies. They had been selling American intelligence to foreign powers for decades, using the cover of legitimate businesses and the respectability of multi-generational American families. But perhaps the most shocking discovery was a list of names. Other families, other sleeper agents whose grandparents had been part of the original Nazi infiltration. The network wasn't just one family or one location. It was a web of connections, spanning generations and reaching into every level of American society. As Rebecca stood in her farmhouse basement, watching federal agents catalog evidence from the second hidden room she never knew existed, she felt a mix of vindication and revelation. Her decision to trust Agent Chen, to risk everything to expose this network, had uncovered something far more significant than anyone had imagined. Agent Chen approached her as the crime scene teams finished their work. "Rebecca, I need you to understand what you've accomplished here. This investigation will prevent countless security breaches, save American lives, and close a chapter of espionage that has been open since World War II. But will it ever really be over?" Rebecca asked, thinking about Emma, about their future in this house that had revealed so many secrets. "Thomas Hoffman is talking. He's providing information about other network members, other locations. The FBI has already made arrests in Colorado and Wyoming. This network that operated in shadows for 75 years is being dismantled because a single mother bought a farmhouse and had the courage to do the right thing when she found something extraordinary." Over the following weeks, the scope of the investigation continued to expand. The arrests of network members revealed connections to intelligence breaches going back decades. Corporate espionage cases that had never been solved suddenly had explanations. Missing government documents were tracked to hidden locations across the American West. Rebecca followed these developments from the FBI safe house, amazed at how her simple desire to provide a home for Emma had contributed to uncovering one of the longest-running espionage operations in American history. But more than the historical significance, she was proud of the choice she'd made to come forward, to trust the authorities despite her fears. Emma returned from Phoenix after 6 weeks, having had what she described as the best adventure ever with her aunt. Rebecca met her at the airport, and for the first time in months, felt like their lives might finally return to some semblance of normal. As they drove home to the farmhouse, now cleared by the FBI and officially safe for their return, Emma peppered her mother with questions about everything that had happened. "So the secret room had another secret room?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Apparently so. Even when you think you've found all the secrets, there might be more," Rebecca replied. "And the bad guys are all caught now?" "The FBI is still working, but yes, the most important ones are caught. We're safe now, Em." Emma was quiet for a moment as they turned onto the gravel road leading to their farmhouse. "Mom, are you glad you found the secret room? Even though it was scary." Rebecca considered the question carefully. The past 2 months had been terrifying, disruptive, and completely unpredictable. But they had also revealed her own strength, her ability to make difficult decisions under pressure, and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was frightening. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm glad I found it. Sometimes we discover things that change our lives in ways we never expected. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be brave enough to face them." The farmhouse came into view, looking exactly as it had the day Rebecca first saw it, weathered, imperfect, but somehow welcoming. Agent Chen was waiting for them, along with a surprise that took Rebecca's breath away. A team of contractors had spent the past week making repairs to the farmhouse, fixing the roof, updating the electrical system, and restoring the interior to a condition better than it had been in decades. The FBI, it seemed, had decided that the family who had helped them solve one of America's most important espionage cases deserved to come home to more than just a fixer-upper. "Consider it a thank you from a grateful nation," Agent Chen said, smiling as Emma raced up the front steps to explore the improvements. Rebecca stood in her driveway, looking at the house that had given her so much more than shelter. It had provided mystery, purpose, and ultimately the opportunity to contribute to something far greater than herself. The hidden safe behind the farmhouse wall had contained secrets that could have remained buried forever. Instead, a single mother's courage had brought them into the light, protecting countless Americans and closing a dark chapter of history. As Emma called from inside, excitedly describing the renovated kitchen, Rebecca realized that their story, the story of a family who had discovered Nazi secrets in a Montana farmhouse, would become part of history itself. But more importantly, it was proof that ordinary people, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, could choose courage over comfort and make a difference that echoed far beyond their own lives. The farmhouse kept its secrets no longer, but in their place it held something even more valuable: the memory of a mother and daughter who had faced the unknown with bravery and emerged stronger than ever before. 6 months after the arrest of Thomas Hoffman and his network, Rebecca Martinez stood in the main lecture hall at Montana State University, facing an audience of 300 students, faculty, and community members. She had never imagined herself giving speeches, but Agent Chen had convinced her that sharing her story could inspire others to speak up when they discovered wrongdoing, no matter how intimidating the circumstances might seem. "When I bought that farmhouse," Rebecca began, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "I thought I was just trying to give my daughter a home. I never imagined that a single decision to investigate something that seemed unusual would help uncover a 75-year-old secret that had been hiding in plain sight." The audience was captivated, but Rebecca could see Emma in the front row, beaming with pride at her mother's courage to tell their story publicly. The 8-year-old had become something of a local celebrity herself, known as the girl who helped solve one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. After Rebecca's presentation, Dr. Patricia Williams, the university's history department chair, approached her with an unexpected proposition. Ms. Martinez, we've been developing a new program in citizen history, encouraging regular people to explore and document historical mysteries in their communities. Would you consider becoming our first official citizen historian? The offer was intriguing, but Rebecca's life had already changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The FBI had offered her a position as a civilian consultant, helping to investigate other potential sleeper cells and historical espionage cases. Publishers wanted her to write a book about the discovery. Documentary filmmakers were lining up to tell the story of the Montana farmhouse that brought down a Nazi network. But what surprised Rebecca most was how the community of Cedar Ridge had embraced her and Emma as heroes. The same neighbors who had initially viewed the single mother from Texas with skepticism now looked at her with respect and admiration. The discovery hadn't just exposed a network of spies, it had revealed the character of an ordinary woman who chose courage when it would have been easier to remain silent. Harold Cranston, the elderly propane delivery man who had known the Hoffman family for decades, stopped by the farmhouse one afternoon with revelations that added yet another layer to the story. "You know, Ms. Martinez," he said, settling into a chair on their newly repaired front porch, "thinking back on all those years, things make sense now. Ernst Hoffman never quite fit in. He knew too much about things a simple farmer shouldn't. No, he had visitors at odd hours, people who didn't look like they belonged in Cedar Ridge." Harold paused, sipping the coffee Rebecca had offered him. "But what bothers me most is how many of us notice these things, but never said anything. We saw the signs, but we convinced ourselves it wasn't our business. Your discovery taught me something important. Sometimes being a good neighbor means asking the hard questions." This sentiment was echoed throughout the community. The revelation that Nazi spies had operated in their midst for decades prompted a period of collective reflection about vigilance, responsibility, and the importance of speaking up when something doesn't seem right. The criminal trial of Thomas Hoffman and his associates became a media sensation that stretched for months. Rebecca was called as a key witness, describing her discovery of the hidden room and the documents it contained. During her testimony, she faced grueling cross-examination from defense attorneys who tried to paint her as an opportunist seeking fame and fortune. But Rebecca's authenticity shone through every question. When asked why she chose to come forward, rather than simply selling the house and moving away, her answer was simple: "Because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where people do the right thing, even when it's hard." The trial revealed the full scope of the network's modern operations. Thomas Hoffman had maintained contact with foreign intelligence services, selling information about American defense contracts, technology developments, and government policies. His legitimate business, a consulting firm specializing in international trade, had provided perfect cover for his espionage activities. More shocking was the revelation that several other families across the American West were connected to the network. Arrests were made in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and even California. The FBI estimated that over the 75 years of operation, the network had compromised hundreds of classified documents and potentially influenced dozens of business deals worth billions of dollars. During the trial, prosecutors revealed that Thomas Hoffman's grandfather, Heinrich Müller, had been more than just a communications officer. He had been one of the architects of Operation Bernhard, a Nazi plan to place sleeper agents throughout the American West, targeting areas with strategic military importance and natural resources. The plan had been more successful than Allied intelligence had ever realized. Dozens of Nazi war criminals had been given new identities and embedded in American communities, where they spent decades building legitimate lives while secretly gathering intelligence, and recruiting new agents from within their own families. Rebecca attended every day of the trial, wanting to see justice done for the decades of betrayal. But more than that, she wanted to understand how such a massive deception had remained hidden for so long. The answer, she realized, lay in the network's ability to hide in plain sight, to become so thoroughly American that their true loyalties were never questioned. The verdicts were decisive. Thomas Hoffman was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His associates received sentences ranging from 25 years to life, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation with authorities. The judge called it one of the most significant espionage cases in American history, and commended Rebecca for her extraordinary courage in bringing this matter to light. But for Rebecca, the trial's end marked the beginning of a new chapter. The FBI had offered her a full-time position as a civilian consultant, specializing in historical espionage cases. The work would involve traveling to locations across the country, helping to investigate other potential sleeper cells and historical mysteries. Emma, now 9 years old and more adventurous than ever, was enthusiastic about the prospect of traveling and helping her mother solve other mysteries. "Maybe there are more secret rooms out there," she said excitedly. "Maybe other families need our help to find them." Rebecca had also been approached by the Discovery Channel to host a documentary series called Hidden in Plain Sight, exploring how historical secrets hide in everyday American communities. The show would combine her personal story with investigations into other unexplained mysteries, from abandoned military installations to forgotten government programs. As news of these opportunities spread, Rebecca realized how much her life had transformed from that desperate day when she'd bought a farmhouse with her last $15,000. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving, building a career around the very curiosity and courage that had led her to investigate that strange wall in her basement. The farmhouse itself had become a different kind of landmark. The FBI had officially declassified the case, and the Montana Historical Society wanted to turn the hidden room into a museum exhibit about World War II espionage in America. Tourists began arriving from across the country, wanting to see where one of America's longest-running spy networks had been exposed. Rebecca initially resisted the attention, wanting to maintain some privacy for her and Emma, but Agent Chen convinced her that sharing the full story could serve an important educational purpose. "Your discovery doesn't just matter because it caught spies," Agent Chen explained during one of their regular check-ins. "It matters because it shows that ordinary citizens can make extraordinary contributions to national security. People need to know that their government depends on citizens like you who are willing to step forward when they see something wrong." This perspective helped Rebecca embrace her role as an unwitting hero. She began accepting speaking engagements at schools, universities, and community organizations, always emphasizing that anyone could find themselves in a position to make a difference if they chose courage over convenience. One particularly meaningful presentation was at Emma's school, where Rebecca spoke to a gymnasium full of elementary students about the importance of curiosity, careful observation, and telling the truth, even when it's scary. "Sometimes grown-ups find things that are confusing or frightening," she told the children. "The easy thing to do is pretend you didn't see anything, but the right thing to do is ask for help from people you trust." That's exactly what I did, and it led to catching some very bad people who had been hurting our country for a long time. After her presentation, a third grader raised her hand. "Ms. Martinez, are you scared that there might be more bad guys out there?" Rebecca considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I do feel scared, but I've learned that being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared. It means doing the right thing, even when you are scared." Emma, sitting in the front row with her class, nodded approvingly at her mother's answer. The bond between mother and daughter had only grown stronger through their ordeal, built on a foundation of shared courage and mutual respect. As Rebecca's first year as an FBI consultant progressed, she helped investigate 3 other potential historical espionage cases. While none proved as significant as the Montana network, each investigation reinforced the importance of preserving and examining historical evidence. In Idaho, she helped uncover a cache of World War II-era documents that revealed previously unknown details about Japanese-American internment camps. In Nevada, her investigation into an abandoned mining facility led to the discovery of Cold War-era nuclear testing records that had been assumed lost. These discoveries made Rebecca realize that her farmhouse revelation was part of a larger truth. America was full of hidden histories, forgotten secrets, and unexplored mysteries, waiting for someone curious and brave enough to investigate them. The publishing offer had evolved into something more significant than anyone anticipated. Rebecca's book, The Safe Beneath the Floorboards, How a Single Mother's Discovery Exposed America's Longest-Running Spy Network, became a bestseller. More importantly, it sparked a national conversation about civilian vigilance and the importance of historical preservation. Book tours took Rebecca and Emma to cities across the country, where they met other ordinary people who had made extraordinary discoveries. In Philadelphia, they met a construction worker who had found Revolutionary War artifacts that changed the understanding of a famous battle. In New Mexico, they met a rancher who had discovered Native American petroglyphs that archaeologists had spent decades seeking. These encounters reinforced Rebecca's growing belief that history wasn't just something that happened in the past. It was alive, hidden in plain sight, waiting for people brave enough to look beyond surface appearances. Emma had embraced her role as the daughter of a citizen historian, developing an impressive knowledge of espionage history and investigation techniques. She kept detailed journals of their travels and investigations, illustrated with her own drawings and maps. Teachers at her school began using her documentation methods as examples for other students. "Mom," Emma said one evening as they returned home to Montana after a particularly successful investigation in Wyoming, "I think I want to be a real historian when I grow up, but not the kind who just reads about old things, the kind who finds new old things, like you do." Rebecca smiled at her daughter's unique perspective. "You know what I think, Em? I think you already are a real historian. You observe everything. You ask good questions, and you're not afraid to explore places other people might overlook." 2 years after the discovery that changed their lives, Rebecca and Emma attended a special ceremony at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Rebecca was receiving the Director's Award for Public Service, the highest honor the FBI gives to civilian contributors. Director James Walsh personally presented the award, addressing an audience that included senior FBI officials, members of Congress, and journalists from major news outlets. The case of the Montana Nazi network reminds us that our nation's security depends not just on federal agents and intelligence professionals, but on citizens who remain vigilant and courageous, Director Walsh said. Rebecca Martinez represents the best of American values, the willingness to act on principle even when personal safety and comfort are at risk. As Rebecca accepted the award, she thought about how far she and Emma had come from that first desperate day at the farmhouse auction. What had begun as a simple desire to provide a home for her daughter had evolved into a new life dedicated to uncovering hidden truths and inspiring others to do the same. In her acceptance speech, Rebecca emphasized the lessons she'd learned. "I'm not a trained investigator or a professional historian. I'm just someone who was curious enough to look beyond surface appearances and brave enough to ask for help when I found something I couldn't handle alone. If my story teaches anything, it's that ordinary people can make extraordinary contributions when they choose to act on their convictions." The ceremony concluded with an announcement that surprised even Rebecca. The FBI was establishing the Rebecca Martinez Citizen Historian Program, providing grants and resources for civilians who wanted to investigate historical mysteries in their communities. The program would train volunteers in proper investigative techniques, connect them with professional historians and law enforcement when needed, and ensure that important discoveries weren't lost due to lack of resources or expertise. Agent Chen, who had been promoted following the successful resolution of the Montana case, would head the new program. Rebecca's discovery proves that some of our most important historical revelations come from people who aren't professional historians or investigators, Chen explained. They come from citizens who notice something unusual and have the courage to investigate further. The farmhouse in Montana had become more than just Rebecca and Emma's home. It was now a symbol of citizen vigilance and historical curiosity. The Montana Historical Society had indeed created a museum exhibit in the hidden room, but they'd done so in partnership with Rebecca, ensuring that the story was told accurately and completely. Visitors from around the world came to see the basement where a single mother's investigation had exposed one of America's most significant espionage networks. The exhibit included original documents from the safe, photographs of the investigation, and interactive displays that helped visitors understand how Nazi networks had operated in post-war America. But perhaps the most powerful part of the exhibit was a simple placard near the entrance, featuring a quote from Rebecca. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from people who are brave enough to ask, "What if this means something more than I understand?" The question isn't whether you're qualified to investigate. The question is whether you're willing to care enough to try. As evening settled over the Montana farmhouse where their incredible journey had begun, Rebecca and Emma sat on their front porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The house had been completely restored, but they'd kept the basement exactly as the FBI had left it after the investigation, with the hidden room now sealed and preserved for history. Emma, now 11 years old and already planning her own career in historical investigation, looked up from the journal she was writing in. "Mom, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't investigated that wall?" Rebecca considered the question, thinking about Thomas Hoffman and his network, still operating in shadows, still betraying American secrets. She thought about all the other discoveries that had followed, all the people inspired to look more carefully at the history around them. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember something important. We don't always get to choose what situations we find ourselves in, but we always get to choose how we respond to them. I chose to investigate because I couldn't live with wondering what that wall was. Hiding, that choice changed everything." Emma nodded seriously. "And now other people are making the same choice because you showed them it was possible." As stars began to appear in the big Montana sky, Rebecca felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with fame or recognition. She had proven to herself and to her daughter that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they acted with courage and principle. The safe beneath the farmhouse floorboards had contained more than Nazi secrets. It had contained the opportunity for a single mother to transform her life and contribute something lasting to her country's security and historical understanding. And in making that contribution, Rebecca Martinez had shown the world that heroes aren't just found in movies or history books. They're found in farmhouses and small towns, in people who choose to investigate instead of ignore, who choose courage instead of comfort, and who believe that everyone has the power to make a difference if they're willing to try. The farmhouse stood solid against the Montana night, its secrets revealed, but its legacy just beginning to unfold through every person inspired to look a little deeper, ask a few more questions, and have the courage to act when they discover something that could matter to the world. 5 years after the discovery that transformed her life, Rebecca Martinez stood at the podium of the United Nations headquarters in New York City, addressing the General Assembly on the importance of citizen vigilance in preserving global security and historical truth. The irony wasn't lost on her. A single mother who had once struggled to pay rent was now speaking to world leaders about the power of ordinary people to change history. Distinguished delegates, Rebecca began, her voice carrying the confidence born of experience and purpose. 5 years ago, I was a medical technician living paycheck to paycheck, trying to provide for my daughter while navigating the challenges of single parenthood. Today, I stand before you as proof that extraordinary change often begins with ordinary people who refuse to accept that something unusual is simply not their business. The audience of diplomats, journalists, and international security experts listened intently as Rebecca outlined how citizen historians around the world had begun uncovering hidden networks, exposing historical lies, and contributing to national security efforts. The Rebecca Martinez Citizen Historian Program had spread internationally, with similar initiatives now operating in 23 countries. Emma, now 16, and already accepted into early admission programs at several prestigious universities, watched from the gallery with pride that had matured beyond her years. She had become an accomplished historian in her own right, co-authoring 3 books with her mother and leading youth investigation teams that had made several significant discoveries. After Rebecca's UN address, Secretary General Maria Santos approached them with an unprecedented offer. Ms. Martinez, your work has inspired a generation of citizen investigators worldwide. We would like to invite you to head a new UN initiative, the Global Historical Truth Commission. This would involve coordinating international efforts to uncover and preserve hidden histories that affect global security and human rights. The offer represented the pinnacle of recognition for someone whose journey had begun with a desperate attempt to buy an affordable home. But Rebecca had learned to measure success differently than she once had. The true victory wasn't in titles or international recognition, it was in the thousands of ordinary people around the world who now looked at unusual circumstances with curiosity rather than indifference. I'm honored by the offer, Rebecca replied thoughtfully, but let me ask you this. How many people in this building today would have investigated a strange wall in their basement? How many would have risked everything to expose what they found? The answer to those questions matters more than any position I might hold. This perspective had become central to Rebecca's philosophy. Over the years, she had deliberately maintained her connection to ordinary people and everyday mysteries, refusing to become isolated in academic or government circles. She continued to live in the Montana farmhouse, now fully restored, but still bearing the scars and stories of its incredible past. The farmhouse had evolved into something unprecedented, a working historical research center where professional historians, FBI analysts, and citizen investigators collaborated on cases from around the world. The Martha Hoffman Historical Investigation Center, named after Heinrich Müller's wife, who had lived unknowingly with a war criminal for 30 years, had become a model for transparent, collaborative historical research. Emma had been instrumental in designing the center's youth programs, creating opportunities for young people to participate in real historical investigations under professional supervision. Her proudest achievement was the Young Investigators Network, which had enabled students from rural schools across America to contribute to significant historical discoveries. "Mom," Emma said one evening as they reviewed applications for the center's summer program, Sometimes I think about how different our lives would have been if you'd just taken that developer's money for the house." Rebecca smiled, remembering those desperate early days when $15,000 had seemed like an enormous gamble. Different, yes, but would they have been better? Would you have learned to see mysteries where others see only problems? Would you have discovered that courage is something you can choose every day? Emma shook her head. "I wouldn't trade any of it, not even the scary parts." The scary parts had been real. Even after Thomas Hoffman's network was dismantled, there had been threats from sympathizers, attempts to discredit Rebecca's discoveries, and constant security concerns. But these challenges had only strengthened Rebecca's resolve and taught Emma valuable lessons about standing up for truth, even when it came with personal costs. One of the most significant developments in recent years had been the expansion of historical education programs inspired by Rebecca's story. Schools across America had implemented mystery investigation curricula that taught students to examine their local history critically, ask probing questions, and document their findings properly. Dr. Patricia Williams, now a close friend and research partner, had documented how these programs improved student performance across all subjects. When children learn to investigate mysteries in their own communities, they become better readers, writers, researchers, and critical thinkers, she explained during a conference on innovative education methods. Rebecca had also become involved in international efforts to locate and repatriate stolen Nazi art and artifacts. Her experience uncovering the Montana network had proven valuable in understanding how Nazi networks had hidden and moved stolen cultural treasures. Working with organizations like the FBI's art crime team and international museums, she had helped recover dozens of stolen pieces and return them to their rightful owners or appropriate institutions. One case had particular personal significance. While investigating a suspected storage facility in Colorado, Rebecca and Emma had discovered a cache of stolen Jewish religious artifacts, including Torah scrolls and ceremonial objects that had been taken from synagogues across occupied Europe. The reunion of these sacred items with surviving Jewish communities had been profoundly moving. "Working on these repatriation cases taught me something important," Rebecca reflected during an interview with 60 Minutes. "History isn't just about facts and dates. It's about honoring the human experience and ensuring that acts of theft and deception don't erase people's heritage and identity." The documentary series, Hidden in Plain Sight, had evolved beyond Rebecca's initial hosting role into a global phenomenon. Each episode featured citizen investigators from different countries, uncovering hidden histories in their communities. The show had inspired copycat investigations, led to the discovery of everything from Viking settlements in Canada to hidden Civil War installations in the American South. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of Rebecca's work was the letters she received from ordinary people around the world who had been inspired to investigate mysteries in their own lives. A teacher in Japan had discovered hidden documents about wartime forced labor in her school's walls. A farmer in Poland had uncovered evidence of a forgotten resistance network on his property. A construction worker in Egypt had found artifacts that changed understanding of ancient trade routes. "Every letter reminds me why this work matters," Rebecca told Emma as they sorted through the week's correspondence. "It's not about the big discoveries or the headlines. It's about empowering people to believe that their curiosity and courage matter." As Emma prepared to leave for university the following fall, Rebecca felt a mixture of pride and melancholy. Emma had chosen to study international relations and archaeological preservation, planning to continue the work they had built together but on a global scale. "I know you're worried about me leaving," Emma said during one of their evening conversations. On the farmhouse porch, but you taught me something important. Courage isn't just about investigating hidden rooms. It's about being willing to explore unknown territories in life, even when it means leaving what's comfortable and familiar. Rebecca nodded, recognizing her own words reflected back to her with the wisdom of a young woman who had grown up understanding that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things. You know what I've learned, Em. The most important legacy isn't what we discover, it's what we inspire others to discover. The summer before Emma left for college, they embarked on one final major investigation together. The FBI had identified a potentially significant site in rural Virginia, where intelligence suggested another Nazi-era operation might have been based. The property had changed hands multiple times, and recent renovations had uncovered architectural anomalies that triggered federal interest. Working with a team of professional archaeologists and historians, Rebecca and Emma spent 2 months carefully excavating and documenting the site. What they found wasn't another spy network, but something equally important, a hidden archive of documents and photographs that provided new evidence about the Underground Railroad, revealing previously unknown routes and safe houses that had operated in Virginia during the Civil War era. The discovery made international headlines, but for Rebecca, the real victory was watching Emma lead portions of the investigation with the same careful methodology and passionate curiosity that had characterized their work together since she was 8 years old. "You know what this proves?" Emma said as they prepared the final documentation for the archive discovery. "History keeps teaching us new things, but only if we're brave enough to look for answers to questions others haven't thought to ask." The Virginia discovery also highlighted how the citizen historian movement had evolved beyond investigating Nazi networks into a broader commitment to uncovering hidden truths about all aspects of history. Rebecca's work had inspired legislation in several states requiring historical impact studies before demolishing buildings over 50 years old, leading to numerous significant discoveries that might otherwise have been lost forever. As Rebecca stood in the restored farmhouse basement one evening, looking at the sealed entrance to the room where everything had begun, she marveled at the ripple effects of that first decision to investigate an unusual wall. The Nazi documents and equipment were now in the National Archives, studied by historians and security experts from around the world. But their real legacy lived in the countless people who had been inspired to ask questions, investigate anomalies, and refuse to accept that mysteries were someone else's responsibility. Agent Chen, now director of the FBI's Historical Crimes Unit, visited the farmhouse regularly to discuss ongoing cases and review the success of the Citizen Historian program. During one such visit, she brought news that would have seemed impossible. 5 years earlier, "Rebecca, we've just received confirmation that the last living member of Thomas Hoffman's network has been located and arrested in Brazil. Heinrich Müller's operation, which ran for 75 years, is finally completely dismantled." The news felt like the closing of a circle, but Rebecca knew it was really just the end of one chapter in a much larger story. The farmhouse basement no longer held Nazi secrets, but it held something more valuable: proof that ordinary people's extraordinary courage could change the world. Professor Williams had recently published a comprehensive study showing that communities with active citizen historian programs reported higher levels of civic engagement, better preservation of local history, and stronger resistance to various forms of fraud and deception. Rebecca's discovery created more than historical revelation, Williams concluded in her research. It created a model for how curiosity, courage, and community action can safeguard both security and heritage. Emma's final high school project was a documentary about the global impact of her mother's discovery, featuring interviews with citizen historians from 6 continents who had been inspired by the Montana farmhouse story. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and won the award for Best Documentary Short, but Emma insisted the real success was that it inspired 3 new countries to establish citizen historian programs. On the night before Emma left for university, she and Rebecca sat in the farmhouse's renovated kitchen, the same room where Rebecca had first examined the Nazi documents with trembling hands 5 years earlier. The kitchen table now held Emma's acceptance letters, research awards, and scholarship offers, rather than evidence of espionage. "I've been thinking about something," Emma said, sipping the coffee that had become their evening tradition. "When you bought this house, you thought you were just trying to provide me with a home. But you actually gave me something much more valuable. You showed me that curiosity and courage are more important than credentials, that ordinary people can make extraordinary contributions to the world." Rebecca felt tears forming as she looked at her daughter, the 8-year-old who had helped map the farmhouse's secrets, now a young woman ready to investigate mysteries on a global stage. "Emma, you've given me something equally valuable. You've shown me that the most important thing we can pass on to the next generation isn't money or property. It's the belief that they have the power to make a difference in the world." As Emma packed her final belongings the next morning, Rebecca noticed her daughter carefully wrapping the original notebook she had kept during their first weeks in the farmhouse, filled with maps of the property and stories about its mysterious past. "I'm taking this with me to college," Emma explained. "I want to remember that the biggest discoveries often start with someone simply paying attention to something that doesn't quite seem right." Rebecca helped Emma load her car, both of them emotional but excited about the future. As Emma prepared to drive away, she rolled down her window for one last conversation. "Mum, the farmhouse is going to feel different without me here every day." "It will," Rebecca agreed. "But the house has taught us both something important. Home isn't just about who lives there right now. It's about all the stories it holds, all the courage it has witnessed, and all the inspiration it continues to provide." Emma nodded, then added something that surprised Rebecca. "I've been accepted to do my senior thesis on citizen archaeology in conflict zones. I want to help people in war-torn countries preserve their cultural heritage and uncover hidden truths about recent history." Rebecca felt a surge of pride and concern. Emma was choosing a path that would be challenging and potentially dangerous, but it was also a path that would allow her to help preserve truth and protect heritage for people around the world. "Just promise me you'll remember what we learned here," Rebecca said. "Sometimes the most important discoveries come from people who care enough to look beyond surface appearances. But equally important is knowing when to ask for help and when to trust the people who want to protect you." After Emma drove away, Rebecca returned to the farmhouse that had given them so much more than shelter. She walked through the renovated rooms, past the walls that no longer held hidden secrets but continued to inspire questions and investigations from visitors around the world. That evening, Rebecca received a phone call that would define the next chapter of her journey. The European Union wanted to fund a comprehensive investigation into hidden Nazi assets and networks across Europe, and they wanted Rebecca to head the project. It would mean spending significant time in Europe, working with teams of investigators across multiple countries. The scope would be unprecedented, the EU official explained. "We're talking about a 5-year initiative that could revolutionize our understanding of how Nazi networks operated across Europe, both during and after the war. Your experience and approach would be invaluable." Rebecca considered the offer, thinking about Emma beginning her college journey, about the farmhouse that had started everything, about the responsibility to use her unique experience to help uncover truth on an even larger scale. The next morning, she called Emma to discuss the opportunity. Her daughter's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Mum, you have to do this. Think about all the families who still don't know what happened to loved ones, all the art and artifacts that are still missing, all the historical truths that are still hidden. Your farmhouse discovery proved that these secrets can be found. Now you can help find them for people around the world." Standing in her basement, looking at the sealed entrance to the room where a Nazi safe had held 75 years of secrets, Rebecca made her decision. She would accept the EU position, continuing the work that had begun with a single mother's desperate attempt to provide a home for her daughter, and had evolved into a global mission to uncover hidden truths and preserve historical integrity. The farmhouse would remain the headquarters of the Martha Hoffman Historical Investigation Center, now under the direction of Professor Williams and a board of international historians. Emma would return between semesters to work on investigations and continue her research, and Rebecca would carry forward the lesson that had emerged from that first night when she opened Heinrich Müller's safe. That ordinary people's extraordinary courage could illuminate the darkest corners of history and create a more truthful, more just world. As Rebecca prepared for her new role with the European investigation, she stood one final time in the farmhouse basement, remembering the fear and determination that had driven her to remove those first stones from the mysterious wall. That single act of curiosity had revealed secrets that had protected America's security, inspired a generation of citizen historians, brought justice to victims of Nazi crimes, and created a global movement dedicated to uncovering hidden truths. The safe beneath the farmhouse floorboards had been empty for years now, its contents catalogued and studied by experts around the world. But the space it had occupied continued to represent something powerful, the idea that truth, no matter how carefully hidden, could be brought to light by people brave enough to look beyond surface appearances and persistent enough to seek help when needed. Rebecca's journey from struggling single mother to internationally recognized historical investigator proved that heroism wasn't reserved for people with special training or rare opportunities. It belonged to anyone willing to act on their convictions, to investigate what others ignored, and to believe that their actions could make a difference in the world. The Montana farmhouse stood as a testament to this truth. Its hidden room now sealed, but its legacy spreading across the globe through every person inspired to ask the hard questions, investigate the unusual circumstances, and trust that their courage could uncover secrets that needed to be brought to light. Years from now, when Emma was leading investigations on multiple continents and new generations of citizen historians were making their own extraordinary discoveries, the farmhouse would still stand in the Montana countryside, reminding anyone who visited that sometimes the most important moments in history begin with an ordinary person facing an unusual situation and choosing courage over comfort, action over indifference, and truth over convenient ignorance. The safe was empty now, but the courage it had inspired continued to fill hearts and minds around the world, proving that Rebecca Martinez's greatest discovery wasn't what was hidden in that room. It was what was possible when people refused to accept that mysteries were someone else's responsibility and chose instead to become the heroes of their own extraordinary stories. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.